want to start off because people in my audience do not know who your dad was. Can you give a little brief description who your dad was? Oh, he still is. Excuse me.
Yeah, my dad is, his name is Sonny Franzese. He was the underboss of the Columbo family, one of the 5 New York mob families back in the 60s. And my dad today is 102 years old.
Wow.
He was released from prison in 2017 at the age of 100 after doing just about 40 years. And I might add, for a crime he didn't commit, but that's a whole nother story. But
right,
that's my dad. Kind of a legend in this life.
Yeah, right. Correct. I want to ask you. I mean, I'm sure obviously your childhood was a little bit different than most kids growing up in your neighborhood. Quickly, how was your childhood, and when did you know your dad was a mobster?
Well, obviously it was different. It was kind of hard to hide the fact that my dad was different, because he was kind of the John Gotti of his day. He had a tremendous amount of publicity, media always following him, law enforcement around us all the time. So I knew from an early age that my dad was was a target, certainly, of the government. And, that was from the time I grew up in Brooklyn. I mean, it was that way my whole life. So I knew very early on what my dad was all about.
So you mentioned, Michael, that your dad gets sentenced, I believe it was 50 years for masterminding bank robberies. Now, you were at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, you were a pre-med at Hofstra. You go see him in jail. I mean, what was the conversation when you told him, Dad, I want to get in this life?
I mean, I love my dad very much. He was my hero, my idol. He was a great father, great husband to my mother, and he didn't want this life for me. He wanted me to be a professional, go to school, be a doctor. I was also a ball player, and that's what he aspired for me. But when he was convicted of that charge and sentenced to 50 years in prison, for me it was devastating because, he was 50 when he went in. Add 50 on top of that, it was a death sentence as far as I was concerned. So, at that time, Joe Colombo was the boss of my family. He kind of took me under his wing. I started meeting a lot of my dad's friends, and I went to see him in Leavenworth, and I said, Dad, what is it with this charge? And, he looked at me and he said, son, I'm innocent. I'm not a bank robber. I was framed, and we got to work hard to try to overcome this case and overturn the conviction. So, I said, what do you want me to do? And it was really at that time that he proposed me for membership. He thought I would be more helpful to him, if I was part of the street life than if I was a college kid. And I bought into that. I said, Dad, anything you want me to do, I'm ready to do. He obviously knew I had it in me. So he proposed me for membership at that point in time. And I was 21 years old at that point.
So you correct me again. Please correct me. You go meet Tom DeBello at, I believe, a social club or a restaurant. And obviously, the mob, you can't just go in and fill out an application for employment. I mean, what was the process like?
Well, I sat with Tom, and he said, Mike, I heard, I got a message from your father. He said, you want to become a member of our life. Is that true? And I said, yes. And he said, well, here's the deal. From now on, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're on call to serve this family, the Colombo family. He said, that means if your mother is sick and dying and you're at her bedside, we call you to service. You leave your mother, you come and serve us. From now on, we're number one in your life before anything and everything. And when and if we feel you deserve this privilege, this honor to become a member, we'll let you know. And I was in, from that point, I was a recruit, and I was in kind of a pledge period where I had to do whatever I was told to do to prove myself worthy.
Was one of your first money-making schemes shipping containers, working on shipping containers?
Yeah, I had a friend of mine that worked for Japan Lines, and we devised a scheme where, basically I was repairing containers that didn't need repair. And we were getting paid pretty good. He was an executive there, so that was kind of the deal. Did that for a couple of years, made a significant amount of money, and it just started from there for me.
So the ball kept rolling for you, pretty much.
Just kept rolling.
I want to take you back, Michael, to Halloween 1975. I mean, tell my audience what happened that night for you.
Well, after a couple of years as a recruit, I proved myself worthy, and it was that night that I was called into a room with 5 other gentlemen, and we all took an oath and became sworn, made members of the family. And I always say, Mike, I took the oath very seriously back then. I take it seriously today, even though I don't consider myself a member of that life anymore. You come into the life, you don't sign a contract. There's no retirement age. So, you can't say I'm done. They say when you leave that life, you either leave in a coffin or join the government, enter a witness protection program. Obviously, I've done neither. But, it was a very solemn ceremony. It was dimly lit room late at night. They wanted you to understand the seriousness of what you were getting involved in. We walked into the room individually. The boss was seated at the head of like a horseshoe configuration. Underboss consigliere to his left and right, and all the captains were alongside of them. I stood in front of the boss, held out my hand. He took a knife, cut my finger. Some blood dropped on the floor. I cupped my hands. He took a picture of a saint. It was a Catholic altar card, actually, and lit it aflame. It didn't hurt. It burnt quickly. It was merely symbolic. And he said, tonight, Michael Franzese, you are born again into a new life, into La Cosa Nostra. Violate what you know about this life, betray your brothers, and you will die and burn in hell like the saint is burning in your hands. And he said, do you accept? And I said, yes, I do. That's how it started for me.
Amazing. You said there was 5 gentlemen in the room?
Well, we went individually, but there were 6 of us that got made that night, yes.
How many of those gentlemen that in the room died of natural causes?
Not one of them, Mike. Every one of them were murdered.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
And that's how it happened for you. Well, after you get out of this ceremony, obviously there's probably a celebration after, and did that respect come to you? Did you get a bunch of crew? Did you get your own crew after that?
Well, you come into the life. You come in as a soldier, so you're not assigned a crew unless you're a capo regime, and at that point I was a soldier. Now I had my own guys around me, obviously, and they were associates, but they were my guys. So yeah, I had a number of guys that I was already had around me, and I was in charge of them. And then I made some money, and in 1980 I was elevated to the position of capo regime. And my former boss, Carmine Persico, he did that for me. He appointed me that. I was doing pretty well, and that's a position he thought that I should have.
It was one of your first, after you had the ceremony, it was one of your first hustles. Was it converting apartments in New York? Am I wrong with the unions?
Well, actually, I started out, I was in the car business. I had a couple of auto body shops. Then I bought a new car agency. Actually, I had 2 car agencies. I had a leasing company. So I started out in the car business. And then one of the things I did, I was into general contracting. We were doing apartment to co-op conversions. And at one point in time, I had the biggest apartment co-op conversion in the country.
Holy crap!
And I was able to keep the unions out. We made a deal, so it was very lucrative for me. We made a lot of money and kept a lot of people in the family happy because we were taking care of some of the union people.
How old were you, Michael, at the time?
I was in my early 20s.
Wow. Can you tell my audience? You're a young kid. You're moving up. You're a good earner, and one of your first sit downs is with mob boss Paul Castelanno. You had a meat store, a meat business with chickens.
Yeah, it was a crazy story. It was a market.
Okay.
And among many things, we sold seafood and fruit and vegetables, and we had a butcher's counter there. And I had gotten some bad chickens, I'd have to say, from Paul Castelanno's nephew or his cousin, I forget who it was. And we had a sit down over it, and it was pretty hilarious at the end of the day. But, it was my first major encounter with a boss from another family.
Right. So the chickens, from what I understand, they had maggots in them.
Yeah, I sold them over Labor Day weekend and Memorial Day weekend. I forget which one it was. And the woman came back. She bought a whole bunch, a couple of $100, and she said they were filled with maggots. So I called up Castellano's relative there, and I said, hey, you got to take these chicken back. And he said, we're not taking them back. And we got into an argument over the phone. The next thing I know, the boss of the family's involved, and we had it was a big deal, trust me.
Wow. What was that like? Again, being a young kid, here's the mob boss right in front of you. I got to go up against this guy, my first meeting? Yeah, well, I had my boss with me and my captain at the time, so they told me what to do, what not to say, so on and so forth. And as it turned out, I came out all right, so it worked out okay. Did you learn anything from that experience? In terms of...
I did. Yeah, it was my first major encounter with a boss, and I learned how to keep my mouth shut and not talk until I was supposed to talk, and take instructions and so on and so forth. And these sit downs were very technical,
right?
And you had to know how to outsmart the guy that you were with, because you couldn't make a mistake that would automatically cause you to lose an argument. So that was my first major encounter. I learned something, and I had some success as a result as I went on in years.
Right. Did you still buy chickens off them or no?
Well, the deal was that I had to continue buying the chickens, but he had to reimburse me for the bad ones.
So he paid you back. All right. So it
Yes,
was a
he
wash.
did.
It was a wash.
It was a wash. Yes.
That's a classic story. So I want to get into obviously your one of your biggest coups, should say. I mean, they called it the gasoline. It's like a prohibition type of thing with Al Capone. The gasoline scams. I mean, in Goodfellas, Frenchie, played by the actor Mike Starr, who's been on the show a bunch of times, he came to the crew with Henry Hill's crew, Paul Vario's crew, and he says, listen, I can get this Lufthansa thing. There's a lot of gold and money in there. In other words, did a lot of people approach you with deals, or did you go out and try to get deals from merchants and stuff like that?
No, Mike, there's a fallacy out there that mob guys sit in their showroom, social clubs, rather, I should say, and they target the next business or they devise these schemes. Most of the time it's not like that. Most of the time it's a guy from a business that, has a plan to defraud his company or make some money, and they come to us. And that happened to me so often. I mean, I actually would, have a place that I was every Monday night, so that if anyone wanted to bring me a deal, they knew where I was and they can come and talk to me then. So it happened quite often. That's how it happened in the gas business. There was a guy that was having some trouble. He had a small operation. Two guys from another family were extorting him, and he came to me for some help. And I helped him out, and we ended up devising a scheme together to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. And it turned out to be, the biggest money-making scheme that we had seen probably since the days of Prohibition, honestly.
Right. Wow. So how did the scheme actually work?
Well, it was simple at first in that we owned a bunch of gas stations. We either owned, operated, leased, and at that time the tax was being taken from the gas station owner. So we withheld it. We devised a scheme to do that. We usually were able to go for about 10 months before the government came down on us. And we just closed down and put another owner in there. And we were able to do that. It was kind of a daisy chain at that time. And the accounting procedure was kind of, it was very intricate, but we devised a way to do that. And then the government came down and they said, well, from now on, we're not going to do that. You're going to have to be a licensed operator, a wholesaler. We're going to have to issue a license. You're going to be able to collect it, and then we're going to collect it from you. Well, when they did that, by the time they were ready to do that and put it into force, we were already prepared and ready for them. I had 18 licenses at that time, and I had 18 different companies that were licensed. And the scheme for us was better than when it was operating out of the gas station. So, and I ran that for just almost 8 years. And
wow.
I had the Russian mob guys were all my partners out of Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, and at the height of my operation, Mike, we were doing 500 million gallons of gas a month. We were taking down $5 to $8 million a week, sometimes $10 million.
Wow.
So it was pretty lucrative.
Wow. So, if I can ask, is this cash? What is this? Is it?
Well, a lot of it was cash, but a lot of it, when it got to that kind of money, we had a banking operation.
Yeah, you can't go to the bank and put it, make a deposit.
Well, we could if we had friendly bankers, we did, but still there was a limit to that also. So we had a pretty intricate system of getting the money, wiring it out of the country to different banks, and so on and so forth.
So you tell the boss of the family, Persico, you go to him and say, listen, I got a good deal. I'm going to make you a ton of money. And what is his first reaction when he told me you're going to bring him a ton of money?
Well, he thought it was drugs, and we weren't allowed to get involved in drugs. And I said to him, Junior, I hate drugs. I would never get involved in it. And I told him it was gas. And I said, I'm going to make you wealthier than anything you've ever seen before. I said, just, don't play any politics. I got to win every argument because everybody's going to want a piece of this. And you can't let anybody get involved, because once everybody gets involved, that's when things get screwed up and we'll blow the whole thing. So, at one point in time, I'm bringing him $2 million a week. So, it brought me a lot of loyalty, and I ran that operation. I never lost an argument, and we all made a lot of money on our family. So people were pretty happy about it.
You mentioned that a lot of families come after you. John Gotti was another family, another crew. What were your dealings with him, if any?
Well, I had a couple of run-ins with John, once in the gas business, once over a big flea market that we had in Brooklyn. But, socially, John was great. I loved him. We had a great time together whenever we were out. Socially, he was great. Business, he was very difficult to get along with. John, everybody knows he had kind of an ego. and it was hard to deal with him because he would never want to lose. So you had to know how to deal with him to get what you want and let him think that he also got what he wants. So we had a couple of scuffles, but, you know, it always worked out okay.
I want to ask you maybe a silly question, Michael. The film The Godfather, there's always a lot of talk going back and forth that, you know, it's probably true. I mean, Joe Colombo had a lot to do with it prior to the filming of it because there was, you know, he sat down with a bunch of producers and told them, I don't want the word mafia in the movie, things like that. Is there a lot of truth to that?
Yeah, that's all true. I mean, I was there around Joey at that time, and, you know, Lenny Montana, who played Luca Brasi, he was a good friend of mine. He was a good friend of the families, and Jimmy Kahn was also associated with us. So, you know, we had control, and those guys let the producers and director understand that, you know, we mean business, and you know, we just wanted it done the right way. And Joey led the charge. When I say we, it wasn't me. I was just there. But, you know, yeah, we had a lot of control over that. And as a result, it was a good movie.
I want to ask you, I mean, you know, what was the action? I believe it was 1972. So what was the reaction to, you know, amongst the guys, you know, the fellas, when the movie came out? Was it some of it that not true? Some of it was crap, you know?
I mean, look, it was a fictional movie, but it was done so well. Mike, I'll be honest with you. You know, guys on the street started to walk around differently after that movie because, I mean, the movie brought a lot of integrity to that life. You got to be honest. You know, it really did. And guys on the street started to carry themselves a little bit differently. And it had a good impact. I mean, you got to be honest at that point. I'm going to tell you, Mike, from the 50s right through to the mid-80s, when Giuliani went crazy with the RICO Act and everything they started to do, those were really the golden years of the mob, certainly in New York, you know, probably throughout the country, but certainly in New York. I mean, we really had it going on during that time. We controlled the unions. We had politicians at our beck and call. You know, we had so much going on, really, during that time. We had all the strength.
Cops, too, I'm sure. Cops.
Well, you know, look, I don't want to make it sound that we controlled the police department. We didn't do that, but we certainly had cops on the payroll. I mean, look, you got to understand, we had 750 made guys that actually took the oath throughout all 5 families. We had a lot of associates. Many of us had relatives that were in law enforcement. We had neighbors that were in law enforcement. We had friends. So, you know, you got to understand, I mean, we knew a lot of people. We had a lot of influence. We took care of the right people. And as a result, you know, we got a lot of things going our way during that time.
Right. I want to ask you another silly question. Forgive me. But Frank Sinatra, I mean, back then when he started out in the 40s, the 50s, you know, but Frank's in the mob. He knows all the mobsters. Well, the mobsters owned the nightclub, so they automatically attached it that he was in the mafia. Did he have any? Do you have any run-ins with him or anything?
No, I knew Frank well. Right. I mean, my dad took me to Capo to see him so many times from the time I was a kid. And obviously Frank had a lot of respect for guys, but no, he was not in the mob, and he wasn't controlled by the mob. I don't think that's the right term to use, but he did favors because favors were done for him, and he respected that. And you know, nobody put too much pressure on him. You know, you see a lot of things, you hear a lot of stories, and you know, people exaggerate. Exactly. He was a friend. He was a friend to a lot of guys. He did the right thing when he was asked to, and then that was it.
Right, that's it. Right. So yeah, that sounds right. I mean, that's they, like you say, they like to embellish a lot of crap on their radio so they get a click or whatever. Somebody listen.
I mean, look, you know, I got to bring it up. It's the same thing with Donald Trump.
Right.
You know, did Trump have mob connections?
Right.
I ran into Donald twice, but I said this, and I'll say it again. He was a developer, a big developer in New York. If you were a developer in New York at that time, you had to deal with us because we controlled the unions. You weren't getting anything done unless you dealt with us.
Correct.
So whether it was him directly or him through his lieutenants, of course he had to deal with us. But you didn't get anything done. He was one of every other contractor that had to deal with us in order to get buildings built and construction done. So, but we didn't own him. We didn't control him. We didn't lend him money. You know, people like to say that, but it's not true.
It's just the way of the land. That's the way business is done. I mean, when you deal with putting up skyscrapers, I mean, you know, what do you think? These are all straight shooters?
Look, I had a guy by the name of Gerald Gutterman, one of the big developers, put up many buildings. He was the owner of the complex, that we converted into co-ops. And I gave him a lot of breaks with the union. I worked with him. He worked with me. He made money. I made money. But we didn't control him. I mean, people got to get that straight. They got to understand how it went back then.
That's just the way it goes. I mean, it's the way, it's like you say, it's the way it is back then, and there was nothing you can do about it. Your building would not get built, period.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
That's it. Michael, so you're getting, years go by and you're getting more and more engulfed into life. Was there ever a time when you were called to a meeting and, you just doesn't feel right to me. I might now leave this meeting. Was there ever a moment like that?
Yeah, I had my encounter, I would say. You know what happened, Mike? Look, it's like anything else. I'm making a lot of money. I'm one of the younger guys. I had a big crew. There was a newspaper report out that I was becoming strong enough to break away from the Columbos, start my own family. There was no truth to that whatsoever. I never even had that thought in mind. But, it starts to play on people's minds a little bit, so they want to put you in your place. And I had a meeting one night that was pretty serious. And, for me, I didn't know if I was going to walk out of there. So it was, one of the horrors of that life is that, you make a mistake, your best friend walks you into a room, you don't walk out again. Unfortunately, that's something that I've witnessed in my life. So you always have that in the back of your mind, whether you did something or you didn't. It's a reality of the life. So you got to, you got to deal with that. You got to deal with it.
Because your best friend may take you there because he's ordered to. If he doesn't take you, he dies.
Exactly.
So if it's on if the shoe is on the other foot, what would you do? You have to take him.
I would have walked him in.
Right.
At that point in time, that was my mentality. As sad as it is, and as terrible as it is, that's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, there is a hierarchy. There are laws. It's like, if a general gives a private an order, the private can't just say, hey, screw you. It doesn't work that way.
No, you can't do that. When you're so much a product of that, like, look, when you come into the life, you're told straight out. You make a mistake, you can pay for it with your life, and your best friend might be the one that has the contract, and you got to deal with that, wrong or right. That's just your mentality at that point in time. So, my mentality was, hey, if I do the right thing, I don't have to worry about that. But unfortunately, again, that is a treacherous life at times, and I saw people, get into trouble for political reasons and maybe lost their life when they shouldn't have. But,
right.
Look. That's how it goes. That's the street life.
I mean, there were ever times when people got ordered, they didn't show up. Was there ever? Do you ever hear stories like that? Guys never showed up, and
I don't know of anything like that in our crew. But I will tell you this: I knew somebody I was very close to that thought he was going to get cold in a room, and was so. I hate to use the word scared because he was a good guy, but he took his own life. He blew his brains out in a phone booth one night rather than.
Jesus.
That's what it does to you, Mike.
I want to ask you another silly question, another silly story. So you're doing time in California. Was it Terminal? What's the name of the prison?
I was in Terminal Island for a while, yeah.
Okay, and obviously everybody nowadays, knew back then nobody knew. Before the Goodfellas came out, nobody actually knew who Henry Hill was unless you were part of the gangs and crews, or unless you were a junkie or some type of a mafia junkie and read everything. But anyways, after he took down the Vario crew, and over here we had a situation with Whitey Bulger, okay, in Boston, and he's a known rat. Everybody knows what he did. Everybody knows it. He was a rat, and they put him in a prison, and they left him. What they do? I think they left him alone, and that was it. They killed him. So would you say that's a mistake on the prison system? Because I thought I heard you say that.
Well, I would not put it past him, only because I had that experience with Henry Hill.
Right.
Henry was in the system. He was in the witness protection program. He was on separation from guys like me. And by mistake, the Bureau of Prisons put him in general population in a prison where there was 7 or 8 mob guys, including myself. And we had an order, shoot to kill on Henry. So, and it was absolutely a mistake. Now, look at it this way, too. This whole Epstein thing, what happened there?
I know.
There's something shady going on. I can't say that I know, but, that was definitely a mistake. And now they put Whitey Bulger in population when everybody knew he was a snitch, and there were guys in there that he shouldn't have been around. So does the Bureau of Prisons make those mistakes? Yes, they do.
On the flip side, could they have done it on purpose on the flip side? You know what I mean?
Well, listen, could they have done it on purpose? I wouldn't put it past them. Who knows?
Right. Michael, you sat down with a lot of the gangsters from the old guys, the old timers and the new kids. I mean, what would you say is the biggest contrast between both of them?
Well, listen, I was around, the Persicos, the Sonny Franceses, the Fat Tony Salerno, Vincent the Chin. I mean, I was around all those guys, and to me, that's what that life was all about. The younger guys today, fortunately, I haven't been around in 20 years. So I can't really say too much about them. Only what I hear, I got my ear to the wall, and it's just different. I mean, they don't have the same discipline as the guys back then had. Look, this is a life built on tradition, and in order to have the tradition, you got to be around the traditional guys that taught you that, and all those guys are gone. So it's a new regime out there, and who knows? I hear things. I'm hearing things about human trafficking. I'm hearing things about drugs that were off limits during my time there.
Right.
The old timers, most of them, they wouldn't stand for that. But now, when I hear human trafficking, when I hear home invasions, look, Mike, we had a certain amount of respect, and there's certain things that we're just off limits.
Right.
And even drugs to a great degree. We weren't major drug dealers. Now, with some guys doing it on the side and sneaking around and doing some minor deals, yeah. But we weren't big drug dealers. Now, the guys from Italy, the Sicilian guys, and they were heroin dealers. But we didn't get involved in that. We really didn't, Mike, and that's the truth. And I would say it now. I got nothing to, nothing to hide at this point. But I don't know. Just there was, I guess what you're trying to say is there was honor back then. I mean, they couldn't even go out with a guy's wife on the side, things like that, because there was honor. Hey, Mike, I'll tell you a story. There was a guy. He was, he was around for about 20 years. Long story short, him and his brother got the contract to kill their own father because their father was messing around with somebody's daughter. And I'll tell you, this is a true story. I drove him home once, right? I get to the house, and he's in Brooklyn, and he tells me, Mike, wait here. So I wait. He goes up to the bell. He rings the doorbell at his house, and nobody answers. 3-4 minutes, he comes back to the car. And I said, what happened? Nobody's home? He said, no, nobody's home. I said, don't you have the key? He said, yeah, I got a key. I said, why don't you go in? He says, Michael, ever since I pulled the trigger on my father, I can't go in my house when anybody's alone. I see his ghost everywhere. It haunts me. Wow. That's a true story, Mike.
Holy
and I was
crap.
like,
I believe you.
I was blown away.
Wow. That's part of the life.
But, I mean, that's the kind of, call it respect, call it warped respect. I don't know what you called it, to take your own father. But that was not tolerated back then. You don't mess with somebody's, look, I lost my dearest friend, for something like that. So, I mean, you didn't mess with that. Trust me.
Right. I mean, you do what you're told. I mean, like you say, if your mother's dying on her deathbed and they call you, you got to go.
No, yeah, today, I mean, they make fun. I'm not being political, but they make fun of our vice president when he said he doesn't want to be in the presence of another woman unless his wife is there. Well, I'll tell you this. During my time in that life, if I went to visit a guy and he wasn't home, I wouldn't enter the house if his wife was there. No way. I'm waiting outside, or I'm coming back later. His wife or his daughter or his sister, that's just the way we were brought up.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. You don't want to give anybody the wrong impression. You don't want a story to come out that maybe is not true. You were in the house, and who knows, So the best thing is you don't even invite that kind of scrutiny.
Right. Yeah, you just don't do that stuff. Michael, I want to take you back to 1971 when Joe Colombo gets shot.
It was the Italian American Civil Rights Day rally.
Were you there?
I was there, yes.
Wow. And what was that like?
Well, it started out to be a huge celebration. We had, I think, upwards of 30,000 people there, and we had a huge stage. There was going to be a lot of entertainment. It was in Columbus Circle. Stage, or Anthony, his son, I forget who called me up, but I went over and Joey handed me some brochures to hand out by Lincoln Center. And I was a captain in the league, not in the family at that point. I was a recruit, but I walked about 10 feet away from him when I heard the shots start to ring out, and I heard somebody else, Joey's been hit, and it was... Yeah, and from that point, it was kind of mass hysteria because everybody heard the shots ring out, and then, then the other guy got killed, the shooter, and everybody just running in every direction, Mike. It was mass hysteria.
Wow.
And me, I was concerned because my girlfriend and my sister were there, and I was trying to find them, and I couldn't. I'm running through the crowd looking for them, and it was a horrible day.
Wow. I mean, was Joey Gallo the perpetrator?
Well, he was behind it. He wasn't there that day. It was that guy, Jerome Johnson, Jerome Johnson, I'm sorry, that actually pulled the trigger, and then, he was killed on the spot. So, yeah, tough day.
Tough day, exactly. Michael, what does the term opening the books mean?
Well, for many years, from the 50s right through the mid-70s, or the early 70s, they weren't bringing anybody new into the family. They weren't making anybody. Unless somebody died or got killed in another family, then they were allowed to make one. But so they said the expression was the books were closed. And then in the early 70s, they opened the books up, and all the families were able to recruit new members. So that's what that meant.
Yeah, it's like being in the union. We're not putting nobody on the list.
Yeah, kind of, right?
Real quick, talk about your relationship with Don King and Al Sharpton, if you can.
Well, I didn't have too much of a relationship with Don King. We met a couple of times, and we were both the subject of a big undercover sting operation by the FBI. And it didn't go anywhere, fortunately. They were on us for about 9 months. They called it shadow boxing. That was the name for the undercover investigation. It was all over the Sports Illustrated. I was all over the news. But Al Sharpton was my liaison, my go-between between me and Don King, because we didn't want to be seen together too often. And Sharpton at the time was a gun for hire. I mean, I did a lot of things with him. He used to bring. Well, I don't want to get into too much, but believe me, I could spend the whole hour talking to you about Sharpton. Trust me.
Right, I believe you. Trust me, I believe you.
But I will say this: 100%, he was a government informant.
Wow.
100%, no doubt about it. It was all over the newspaper. Newsday wrote 3 front page stories about his cooperation. So he tries to deny it, or he makes excuses that he was doing. So I don't know what he was doing, but he was 100% a government informant, and the reason he turned informant was because they caught him in a drug deal, and that was it.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, no, I believe you. Trust me.
Yeah, I say that under oath, so trust me on that.
Okay, I do. Michael, so there comes a time in your life when you want to get out. You say one of your best friends was murdered. Was that Larry Carrozza? Am I wrong?
Yes, that's correct.
You can't just send out like a mass email to everybody and say, "Listen, I'm getting out. I'm not gonna rat anybody out, but I'm getting out." I mean, how did that go? How did it work? You can't take out an ad in the paper.
Well, no, it was long story short, after 5 indictments and 5 trials, last one that I beat with Rudy Giuliani, I beat him on a big racketeering case. And then the Eastern District of New York was coming down on me with this whole gasoline racketeering case. So I decided I was going to take a plea, do some time, give the government some money. I married this young Christian girl, moved out to the West Coast, and was figuring after prison, I'd come out, I'd have parole and probation, use that as an excuse not to meet up with the guys, and live out in California. Maybe they forget about me. So that was the plan. I didn't make an announcement.
Right.
You can't do that. I was just, and everybody had their own trouble because, everybody was getting indicted for RICO. We had a war in our family. People were dying off. So I was just hoping to slip away quietly and let people forget about me. But it didn't happen that way. The newspaper wrote it up that I was quitting the life. And I had a whole bunch of trouble, Mike, you know. But, I just, look, I knew what I had to do to protect myself, and I ended up surviving.
I want to ask you, Michael, and again, you don't have to answer, this isn't a witness stand, but you believe that the mob played a part in the assassination of JFK?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt in my mind. Look, obviously I was a young guy then, and I wasn't around during that time. My father certainly was. But, you hear a lot of stuff afterwards, and from reliable sources within that life, and they had no reason to lie to me. It's all general conversation. So guys were around at the time, and there's no doubt in my mind no doubt in my mind that that we had something to do with that, a lot to do with it.
Yeah, because there's so many stories and you're going around. Obviously,
Well,
Bobby.
remember this, Mike. Remember this: the government will never, those papers that are under seal. The government's not going to admit that the mob was able to get to a sitting president.
Right.
I mean, come on. How does that make everybody look? So it's never going to happen. They're never going to admit to that, no matter what.
Right. I mean, because obviously a lot of people who don't know that, JFK gets in office because of Giancana in Chicago. He needed Chicago. He needed, I believe, another state. And then Bobby Kennedy, all right, guys, back off. And Bobby Kennedy comes in as the attorney general and just goes after the mob. I mean, they're like, what the hell's up with this? And
exactly. I mean, look, not only did they not keep their word and have entree to the White House, but they come after us.
Right.
I mean, that was the big mistake. If Bobby Kennedy would have just backed off and just did his business, if you remember.
Right.
If Robert Kennedy would have followed the program,
correct,
probably nothing would have happened.
I mean, why wouldn't he come after why did he say there's no such thing as a mafia?
Well, because we had dirt on him. We knew that he was his sexual preferences at the time, and we had dirt on him, and he didn't want it exposed. It was a different time back then. You know that.
Of course. And I want to circle back to JFK real quick because it's a funny little anecdote. Did your dad go out with Marilyn Monroe?
Absolutely. And my father swears, and you know what? My father, sometimes he can embellish things,
right,
little stories, but this I believe because, I said to him one time, I said, Dad, why did they come down on you as heavy as they did? I mean, you were an important guy, but I mean, they had Frank Costello, the Chin, everybody was around. Why did they pick on you like that? And he told me straight out, he said, Mike, it was Bobby Kennedy. He knew that I went out with Marilyn Monroe. He made a vendetta against me, and he's the one that ordered Hoover to come down on me. And I believe it. Wow. It makes perfect sense.
Wow.
Makes perfect sense.
Wow. Real quick, stay on that subject real quick. Do you think the mob had something to do with Marilyn Monroe's death?
I never heard that.
Right.
So I
can't.
I can't say that.
I figured while I'm on it.
No, I never heard that.
Michael, I want to ask you. I had the author Charlie Brandt on my show. I'm not sure if you know who he is, but he's written a book called I Heard You Paint Houses, which now is a big movie coming out next month or whatever with De Niro, Pesci, and Pacino and everybody. And I read the book, and in the book it's about Mafia enforcer Frank the Irishman Sheeran, talking about the murder of Jimmy Hoffa. In the book, I guess he interviewed him for a couple years prior to his death, and he wanted to come clean. So in the book, he says that Jimmy Hoffa got out of jail, wanted to go back to become president of the Teamsters, take over for Fitzsimmons, I believe, and they didn't want that. They just wanted him to just sail off into the sunset, and Jimmy wouldn't do that. So the scenario that he says in the book states that they brought him to a house in Detroit, at a vacant house, for a meeting with, I forget the Mafia name back then, I forget his name. They bring him into the house with Frank Sheeran behind them because he was pretty much his bodyguard. And as soon as he walks in, he sees these two brothers, and he knows who they are. And he turns around, walks out, and Frank Sheeran puts one in the back of his head. Then they take his body and they bring it to an incinerator and incinerate him. What do you know about that, if anything?
I don't believe that story.
Okay.
And I don't care what he says. I heard from what I believe is very reliable sources. One of the shooters is still alive.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, he's in prison. I actually have some tapes that, to me, are more credible than what was written in that book. And I know where the order came from. Now, obviously, Raymond Patriarca, we talk about that, and there was truth to that. But I know where the definite order came from to take Hoffa out. And it is true. They did want him to just go away.
Right.
That was it. Relax,
wow.
Go away. And he didn't want to, and that's why he got killed. But I don't believe what's written in the book, and I don't believe Sheeran. That's my personal opinion. I got nothing to lose or gain on this. It's just that I believe my source is accurate.
What do you think they did with his body?
I can tell you this, okay? They'll never find his body. It's not under the Meadowlands, and I believe it's very wet where it is.
Okay. It's not in my bathtub, just so you know. It's not in my bathtub.
No, not in the bathtub.
Do you also believe, I mean, he said it in the book as well. I'm just stating from the book. I don't know anything pertinent to it. But he also stated that it was Frank Sheeran that walked into Umberto's Clam House that night and killed Joey Gallo.
I don't believe that either.
Okay.
I know that's just such nonsense. There was another guy that wrote a book, and he was leading. I don't remember it, but if you remember, he was in prison. He wrote a book, and he claimed he knew exactly where Hoffa's body was buried. He led the FBI to a house in Detroit. I think it was Detroit. They dug up the whole house with bulldozers. They found nothing, and the guy sold a ton of books. Right. So he pulled a scam on the FBI. I mean, look, this Hoffa mystery is going to go on. It's not going to be solved unless the actual guy takes a lie detector test, a truth serum, and we know that that's the truth. If he does it before he dies. But look, I don't believe any of that stuff. I think, I believe I know what happened. I've heard it throughout my lifetime in that life, and I believe it's true. So that's my opinion. Like I said, I got nothing to gain or lose. It doesn't matter. Right,
of course. Michael, out of all the movies, Goodfellas, The Godfather, Casino, or Godfather 2, which one of these movies depicts life in the mob the best?
Look, Goodfellas was a pretty accurate depiction of that life. So was Donnie Brasco. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, real quick. You bumped into Pistone on the street.
Oh, yeah. I bumped into him on the street, and then I've seen him a few times since. We did some speaking engagements together, I would say. But, I'm glad I didn't have any business with him because I knew Lefty pretty well.
Right.
But fortunately, we didn't do anything together on the street.
And Lefty, real quick, did not get killed by the mob. He was one of the rare breed that died of natural causes.
Lefty died of natural causes.
Okay.
Sonny Black got killed.
Yeah, right. Sonny Black, yeah. Wow.
But I want to mention this,
go ahead,
Mike.
Mike.
I don't know if you saw it, but did you ever see the Gotti movie?
With Asante. Ahmad Asante in that?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Quack. They got quack.
To me, that was one of the best mob movies. It was It was accurate. It was amazingly acted. Ahmad Asante did a tremendous job in that movie. And to me, it was one of the best mob movies ever. I put it right up there, believe it or not. I put it right up there with The Godfather. I thought it was that good.
Get out.
I'm telling you.
Holy crap.
I'm telling you. Anthony Quinn was brilliant.
Yes, he played Neil Della Croce, I think.
He did. He was brilliant in that movie. And Asante was everybody was brilliant. And the story was depicted very well, very accurately.
Wow. Well, that's good to know. It's good to know.
Oh, yeah. Great movie.
So you're going to tell me, in front of all my viewers, that the scene in Goodfellas when they're drinking the wine and having a good time, what is that?
In prison?
In Goodfellas, yes. Sorry.
Oh, that was such nonsense, Mike. Forget about it. I mean, look, every once in a while, I mean, we ate a little bit better because we had our own guys in the kitchen, but that was such nonsense. Forget it.
So let me ask you this, Michael. So if Michael Franzese, captain of the Columbo crime family, went to a psychiatrist once a week, and the crew found out about it, what would happen to Michael Franzese?
Let me tell you, I'd be in the trunk of the car along with the psychiatrist. That's for sure. By the end of the week, they wouldn't wait.
Michael, this has been great. Can you tell my audience what you're doing nowadays? Because it's an incredible transformation.
Well, Mike, I became a person of faith, and I share my testimony in churches for the last 23 years throughout the world. I also, speak at a lot of business gatherings. I work with all the pro sports and all the college sports. I educate athletes about the dangers of gambling and try to keep them straight with the relationships they keep. I've been doing that for 23 years. I just left Alabama, and my good buddy Nick Saban, I'm kind of his lucky charm. Yeah, he's a great guy, Nick, and obviously a great program. But, so I do that a lot. I got a very